Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Hopefully, everybody's doing great today. So, just to let you know, today we have a great show. Hopefully, this gives you more answers if you're seeking to figure out how to be the main character in your movie. And for that, we have Marcia Mara to talk to us on how to stop being the spectator of your own life. Also, with us, we have Tori Warren. She's our virtual assistant. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Okay,
Hello,
Marcia,
hello.
the floor is yours. I'm gonna be away, but I'm gonna be listening. Okay. See you all in a second.
Sounds good. All right. Awesome. So, thank you everybody for being here. I hope you can hear me okay. I've been having some issues with my internet today, so hopefully it'll help out and be cooperative as we are sharing our time here today. Tori, so great to have you here. How are you today, hon?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Marcy?
I'm doing fantastic, and I just can't wait to dive into this. So, have you ever had the experience of feeling like you are almost just hovering over your own life, just kind of watching what happens, but you feel like you have no say and no control over anything? Has that ever happened to you?
Yes, it has.
So I want to start today by posing a question for all of us, right? And I would love to hear your answer, Tori. But if you are watching and you want to put it in the chat or just think about it for a minute. But when you were little, what did you pretend to be when you were playing and just doing your thing? What did you pretend to be when you were little?
Um, I always pretended to be an attorney. I always wanted to go into law. I think Marcy's frozen just a moment. So I think I shocked her
I
with what
don't
I
know if
said.
this is my connection. Let me try something real quick here. Did you lose connection too, Tori, or was it just me?
You were frozen. Either that or I shocked you with what I always wanted to when I played what I wanted to be. And you're frozen again.
Let's see if that helps.
Great. Modern technology, isn't it wonderful when it works?
It's amazing when it works, and when it doesn't, we don't want to say anything bad because then it gets angry. No, I'm just kidding. But the question is, again, for everybody to just think about, what did you used to pretend to be when you were little? You want to share a little bit, Tori?
Yeah, you keep freezing up when I tell you, though. I wanted to be an attorney.
Huh, that's fun. What kind of attorney?
Well, I always loved watching Perry Mason when I was little. So, I always just wanted to be in a courtroom.
Well, there you go. Well, you want to know something? I used to be Wonder Woman. Whenever I played and I pretended to be something, I was Wonder Woman, and I just loved envisioning myself with like the wristless fighting off the bullets and flying on the invisible plane and all those things and the quick wardrobe changes. I thought they were so fun. So, and when I played with my brothers and my two male cousins that were always in my house, then I got to be Princess Leia, right? So I was either a galactic princess or an Amazonic hero. Either way, I was this grand figure, right? And I'm
Mhm.
sure when you pretended to be a lawyer like Perry Mason, you were the best lawyer ever, right?
Absolutely. I got to the truth. That was it. Every single time, just like Perry.
And you never lost a case, right?
No, never, never.
Isn't that funny? And the thing is, I've asked this question of hundreds of people at this point, and I have never had anybody tell me something like, "Well, I just wanted to get by. I wanted to make sure I could pay my bills, or I pretended to be the one that took care of everybody else but myself." That never happens. Nobody ever says things like that. right? So that has gotten me to thinking. And the more I do this, the more I think about it, then what happens, right? Because even in those moments when I pretended to be something like a housewife, I never pretended to be this beaten up figure that was always exhausted, that didn't know what to do, that was dragging herself from one task to the other. I was like Donna Reed, like all elegant and with my heels and my cute little apron.
Mhm.
So we never, as little kids, envision ourselves as anything other than the best possible scenario. And I don't know if you've had the experience, I'm sure you have because you have a daughter, but when you play with little kids, have you had them tell you the entire script of the game? Like, okay, so you're going to do this, and then this is what happens next, and then this, and then that. And they know exactly how the story needs to play out, don't they?
Mhm.
And it is just so fun to watch the posture and the poise with which they tell you, you know what, this is what's going to happen next, and you're going to say this, and then you're going to say that, and then you're going to move here, and then that's going to happen. And what happens is when you look at little kids and you look the way we approach life as little kids, we are the scripters, right? We are writing the story as we go, and it might not always work out exactly the way we want, but we still feel like we can write it, we can create it, we can imagine it. And there's nothing that tells us, no, you're imagining too big or you're dreaming too high when we are little, right?
Mhm.
But then all of a sudden, we start growing, we start going to school, we start getting older, and we start getting all these programs into ourselves and into the way we see ourselves and the world, right? And little by little, we go from being the scriptors of our lives to becoming more spectators of our lives. And we start seeing life passes by and we start seeing things happen. And we wonder, wait a second, where on earth did that come from? How did that happen? Right. And we get to that space from the first question I asked you. Do you ever feel like you're just kind of like watching your life and just seeing things happen that you're like, okay, wait a second, is that really me? It feels almost surreal, doesn't
Mhm. Yeah.
it? And what tends to happen is that the more we give into this programming, and we're going to talk a little bit about that programming in a second, but the more we give into it, the more we go with the flow, the more we believe that that's the way it gets to be, the less we feel comfortable with dreaming and envisioning ourselves as that attorney that always gets to the truth, or that superhero that can save the day, or whatever it is that we envisioned ourselves as being when we were little. And that's not to say that we should go through life dreaming that we can be Superwoman, right? Or Wonder Woman. But it is to say that we had some dreams and some aspirations and some views of who we got to be that we surrendered somewhere along the line, right? So,
Mhm.
what happened? One of the things that I have discovered is that we have bought into a number of lies that we have allowed to shape how we see our lives, right? There are some things that we have believed along the way that have created barriers and have created limitations for us. And I'm going to share a few, and I would love to know if you resonate with these or if there's others that you have bought into, right? Like for me, for example, one of the first lies I learned is that there is a right and wrong way to do things. Have you bought into that one?
Yes, I have.
And we carry that throughout, right?
Mhm.
Like, even as adults, especially entrepreneurs and people who are venturing into things that are less traditional than most, we buy into this notion that no, there's a right way of doing things. And if we're not doing it the right way, then we're failures, right? And there's a right and a wrong way to do things. But what that means underneath all of that is that if there's a right and wrong way of doing things, then I have to do things exactly the same way as those people who got it right. Otherwise, I'm wrong. Right?
That's the lie we buy into.
And so what ends up happening is that I'm comparing myself to all these other people. And I'm sizing myself and my possibilities based on how I see myself in comparison to those people. But is that really necessarily the case? Right? There's
Mhm.
a very gruesome expression that we don't use as much anymore, but there's more than one way to skin a cat. And we forget that just because it worked that way for that person doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work exactly the same way for me, or that I have to do it exactly how they did it in order to get the result I'm looking for, right? Because we all bring different things, and we're going to talk more about this in a minute, but we all bring different things to the table. And depending on the combination, we're like a pot of stew, right? So we have
Mhm.
all these things, all these ingredients that are dumped in for different reasons at different times and different moments, right? And my stew might turn out to have chicken and, I don't know, carrots and potatoes, and maybe your stew has fish, or I don't know, something else,
Mhm.
because you have different ingredients that you're bringing in, but it's still a delicious stew at the end, right?
Mhm.
So it's understanding that just because something worked for you, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work exactly the same way for me. I mean, if you could do it, I can figure out a way to do it, that's for sure. But I don't need to necessarily do everything exactly the same way you did it in order to get the same result, right? And on the other side of that same coin is the fact that maybe, maybe the way I bring to do things is going to create a completely different type of result that is still positive, that it's still wonderful, that it's still amazing, and it might not look anything like anybody around me, right? Because we all bring our own unique sauce, right? Another lie that I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, exactly. And especially when you were talking about the stew. I have several really good friends. We love cooking. So I love that cooking analogy there. I make something called gnocchi soup. It's supposed to be exactly like what they prepare at Olive Garden. So I've
Hmm.
shared that recipe with several of my friends. And when I make it, it has one flavor. They make it, it's different. They don't like theirs, they like mine. What's the difference? And when we drill down, I mean, they have bought the exact same spices from the exact same store. And the thing of it is that's different is we're all using different pots to cook it in.
Mm.
That has been flavored throughout the years with whatever. All of theirs are good, but they prefer what I've done. And the only difference is the pot. So, yeah, exactly. I mean, we all bring different things and experiences. So, it's never going to be exactly the same. So, there's not really a true right or wrong, it's perspective.
Absolutely. And again, there are some things that work for other people. Like I can give you a very clear, for instance, I have a really hard time um, doing cold calls of any kind, anything that feels like a cold call. I
Mhm.
just have a very hard time with it. When I was in the financial services industry, that was one big way of getting clients and leads was cold calling people. And every time I tried to cold call, it was a disaster. And I had tons of colleagues and mentors that did the cold calling and they had great results. I couldn't do it, but I found another way to do it. I love speaking. So I started planning speaking events, and I would speak, invite people to the event, speak, give them some information that was useful and valuable. And at the end, I would invite them to have a private conversation with me. And that's how I got my leads. And that worked perfectly for me. Some of my colleagues tried that, they bombed, they couldn't do it, right? So that's one example I have in my own personal life of how what works for one person might not work for the next. The end result might look similar, right? But if we're looking to just copy and paste everybody else, what we're
Mhm.
doing is we are removing that ability to be scripters. We're becoming spectators more and more because we're just looking at everybody else, seeing what everybody else is doing, and then trying to look like them. There's no longer that version of ourselves, right? So that's one big, huge lie that we buy into. And it's a myth that is drilled into us by the way we're educated, by the system, by the way we're raised, by a bunch of other different things that we don't really need to talk about right now because everybody knows what they are. But we
Mhm.
buy into that lie and then we end up looking at our lives and wondering, what on earth happened? Where did I go? Right? And we
Mhm.
don't recognize our own selves in the things that we're doing. The other lie that we buy into a lot is this idea that everything in our lives needs to be perfectly balanced. Like we need to have balance with our personal life, balance with our work, balance with our everything needs to be perfectly balanced. And that feels so exhausting. I don't know about you, but every time I think about the idea of having my life perfectly balanced, I get exhausted. I'm like, how on earth am I going to do this? And when we really think about the way the world works, most people work 8 to 10 hours a day, right?
Mhm.
If you're going to dedicate the same 8 to 10 hours a day to your family, that's 16 to 20 hours. When do you eat? When do you sleep? When do you do anything else, right? So we tend to look at this idea of having a balanced life in quantitative terms instead of qualitative terms, is the first thing. And the second thing is that we don't understand that nothing in the world is really balanced. Everything is in a process of balancing, but
Mhm.
nothing is ever truly 100% balanced, right? That's why we have cycles, and that's why we have moments in which things perish and then they resurface, like plants. Look at plants, for example, right? We have the poinsettias are out now, beautiful and blooming, but there's a period in the year when they disappear completely. And in fact, if you want them to bloom beautifully when they're supposed to, you need to prune them and trim them and cut them down in June, I believe it is. My mom's the one that knows all the details of the plants, but you need to prune them in order for
Mhm.
them to bloom, right? So the entirety of the world operates in cycles, and we want somehow to be completely balanced. And the best example I can think of how this really works is thinking of bicycling. Do you bicycle? Do you ride a bicycle? Do you know how to ride a bicycle? No? Okay.
I know how, but I prefer not to.
I don't like riding bicycles. I don't, but I just think it's a great example, right? Because if you just sit on your bike and you lift your feet to the pedals and you're grabbing onto the handlebar, but you're just standing there, how long are you going to be standing? How long are you going to be balanced?
Not long.
Not very long.
Mm-mm.
Very soon you're going to topple to one side or the other, and you're either going to fall or put a foot down in order to lean in one direction or the other to stay stable, right? Or stable,
Mhm.
air quotes. The only way to feel balanced in a bicycle is to be pedaling, to be
Mhm.
moving. If
Right.
you're not moving, then you're going to fall automatically to one side or the other. So that is the best analogy I think of when I think about this idea of you need to have a balanced life. No, we're always in the state of balancing. It's like riding a bike. We're always moving. And as long as you're moving, you get a sensation of balance, right? But it's only because you're constantly balancing as you move. So in
Mhm.
life, we're doing the same thing. We're constantly looking to be balancing everything that is important in our lives. That means that at any given moment, we might be moving more towards focusing on the business, right? That doesn't mean we're ignoring or forgetting that we have a family. And as long as they get quality when we get to them, we know that in the cycles of life, eventually they're going to have more of a focus from us, right? And the business is going to be at that time balancing and waiting in the background until we can focus again. But when we do, it will be qualitative again, right? So as long as we are fully present and giving quality as opposed to quantity, then we can be balancing our lives and we can be shifting. It's like moving things from one space to the other, right? It's like this is in the focus right now. Okay, switch. Now you're in the focus. Okay, switch. Now you're in the focus, right? And in the meantime, everything else is balancing in the background and we know it's there and we're not completely dropping it. We're just focusing on that for the quality at the moment. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Right. And I think that that's one of the biggest pressures, especially for women. And I don't mean that men don't have this, I'm sure they do. Right. But I've experienced it a lot more with women, where we feel like if we're focusing on one thing and we're not paying attention to the other, we feel guilty because we're not paying attention to that one thing. And we put so much pressure on ourselves. And that leads us to giving into certain things that might not really fit where we want to go or what our values are, or what our priorities are, right? And so
Mm.
that is a big aspect of things. Do you resonate with that?
Yes, I do. I do. Trying to keep that the buzzword work-life balance. That's what everyone talks about and tries to achieve, and it has that vision, that dream of perfection, having all of that. And I liked what you said. You're always moving towards that. You're always, you're always trying to get there. But it's always in motion. And that's what keeps everything in balance, is just that motion of it.
Absolutely, right? And it's this idea or this understanding that as long as you are clear on where your priorities are, right? What the important things in your life are. And when you are in a space you're fully present, then you are doing everything that you need to do to be in that space of balancing your life, right? And it's consistent and it's always moving and it's always iterating. And there are going to be seasons in your life where you focus more on business in terms of time.
Mhm.
But as long as your presence is there when you're with your family, they will enjoy it as much as if it was a million years, right? And the same thing in the other aspect, when you're focusing more on your family, the business doesn't necessarily have to be sacrificed or suffer. It's just that this is the season for this. But when I am at work, I'm going to be fully present so I can maximize it. Because what tends to happen, and let me know if this is just me, I don't think it is, but when I don't understand this, or when I was in this process of trying to achieve that perfect work-life balance, I would be at work or doing work stuff, and I would feel so guilty that I was leaving my girls and that I wasn't doing the family thing, that I would waste or spend so much of my bandwidth and so much of my time feeling guilty about what I should have or could have done with my kids, that I didn't give my full attention to work, right? And so then everything took longer. Everything was not as high quality as it could have been. And then the reverse happened too. Then when I got home, I'd feel guilty because I knew I didn't put enough effort or enough attention to what I was doing at work. And so I was never fully anywhere. And everything felt heavy and everything felt difficult, and nothing got the quality that it could. But when I started to realize, look, if you're going to work, be fully working and ignore the other things for now. That doesn't mean you're forgetting them. That doesn't mean you don't care about them. It just means that the more presence and focus you put on what you're doing, the better quality it's going to be and the farther you're going to get. And so you can do more with less time. Right?
Yes, exactly. And where I tend to fall into that trap of trying to balance both, I am a planner. And so then I find that even though I'm trying to focus on work and I'm trying to focus on family and I'm trying to plan them both out, I spend more time in the planning than the actual execution. And then I'm just exhausted from that. And so then the guilt of I've let both down at the same time, but I've got some really good plans that I don't have to implement because I need to move on to something.
Yes, I heard someone say once that planning is essential, but plans are useless. And what that means is if you're just working on a plan that is not going to be executed, then what's the point? It's just paper that is filled with stuff, right? Or whatever the case might be. But if
Mhm.
you're planning as you go and you're thinking, okay, I have 5 hours here. What am I going to do with these 5 hours? Let's get to execution. And in the other side, okay, I have 4 hours here. What am I going to do with these 4 hours? Let's get to execution. Then you maximize both without feeling like you're
Yes,
wavering anywhere, right?
yes, exactly. And that's the secret sauce, is being, when you're making the plans, plan the execution too.
Absolutely. And then the final lie that I want to just throw out there that we buy into is this idea that we need to be 100% confident before doing anything, that confidence is a prerequisite for getting things done. There's a great quote by Stephen Chandler and Rich Litvin. I always mix their last names. um, that says that confidence is a result, not a prerequisite, right? So confidence comes from action. When we stop and we start believing the lie that we need to be 100% confident before doing anything, that's when we fall into paralysis by analysis. That's when we fall into procrastination. That's when we fall into inaction, because now we have an excuse and a reason to not do it. I can't do it because I'm not confident enough, right?
Mhm.
But then the thing that kills me is that the same people that tell you that you have to be confident to do things don't know how to help you get confident. Right? They tell you, you need to be confident. You have to have confidence to do the thing. Okay, how do I get confident? Well, you just are. You just go and you're
Mhm.
confident. Right? And so it's this cycle, this snowball effect almost, where you're just looking for more confidence. But until you have the confidence, you can't be confident to do the thing that you're looking to be confident around. And you're just running around in circles like a
Mhm.
headless chicken. So when we understand that confidence is the result, not the prerequisite, then we can understand that the more we do the thing, the more confidence we're going to feel around it, right? And
Mhm.
there's other things that we can work on and talk about, and be on the lookout because I'm about to release a mini course on confidence that I think people are going to love. But there's a whole other way to look at this. And when we understand the truth about how confidence really works, then we can snap out of that nonsense of waiting to be confident before doing the thing.
I've always been a victim of that, thinking I had to have the confidence first. But when I had that mental switch, when I was able to flip that switch and go the other direction and say, you're never going to be confident until you just dive in and start doing it.
Mm-hmm.
When I finally started executing that, and I think that that might be the key takeaway is the execution. When
Yeah,
you start actually being in motion and doing those things, that's when the confidence comes. And
absolutely.
sometimes little by little, but then other times it's just like you just do it. And it's like, what was I so afraid of in the first place?
Yep. And what I heard someone say that really resonates with me is that very often when we say we need confidence, what we really need is the courage to take the first step, right?
Mhm.
And I just love this conversation because I think it helps us understand that there's all these little things that have been programmed into us by well-meaning people who want us to want to see us do well, right? But in the end, what they do is they limit our ability to continue to script our lives, and they turn us more and more into spectators, because if we're waiting to be confident, that whole time we're just looking, we're just observing, we're not really participating, we're not really creating anything. If we're waiting for our life to be in balance, our work life balance to be in place, we're going to be just observing everything that we believe people who have work life balance have, and we're not really executing or understanding what's underneath the surface. If we're waiting for the right way to do things, and we don't understand that what might seem wrong to them might be right to us, and that it is by testing things out that we get to what's right for us, then we're also stuck in that spectator mode of watching everybody else do the right thing while we're trying to figure out what that right thing is. And once we keep buying into these lies, what happens is we lose some really important elements of being the scriptor of our lives, right? Because we lose our ability to dream big, we lose our unique voice, and we lose touch with our calling and our true vision. And so then we wonder why, like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Mulan. Have you?
I have, yes.
I love that song. Like, when will my reflection show who I am inside? I think a lot of us live so much of our lives like that. Like, we're looking at someone in the mirror that we don't even recognize anymore. I posted something on social media a while back, and it was a picture of me, no makeup, just me sitting there somewhere. And the caption was, "Oh, there you are." Because I felt that like I had lost myself for so long. And I finally was looking at myself thinking, yeah, that's me. That's me again. Right. And I reconnected with who I was and who I am and who I get to be. And that is a very important part of what we get to do. Right.
Mhm.
And I would love to share a story here that I think might help all of us understand how to move from being a spectator to reclaiming that role as the scriptor of our lives. And it's the story of the turtle and the giraffe. I don't know if you've ever heard that story.
I have.
There's okay, it's not my story. I believe, I don't want to mess up who was the first person. I think it was TD Jakes. I want to say it was TD Jakes, but anyway, look it up, the giraffe and the turtle. And I am going to shift a few things, but it's the general notion is the same. So there's this giraffe that's placidly eating off the top of the trees. You know how giraffes are really tall and they eat off the top of the trees. And
Mhm.
suddenly she hears a voice way down low that goes, "Psst, psst, what are you doing?" And the giraffe gets a little confused and looks down, and there's a turtle at her feet eating grass from the bottom. And the turtle's looking up, and she asks the giraffe again, "What are you doing? Why are you eating that stuff up there? And the giraffe is like, well, it's delicious and it's right here and I can reach it very easily. So it's exactly what I need right now. And the turtle's like, no, 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 you don't understand. The good stuff is down here. You need to come down and eat this grass down here. This is what's good. And the giraffe is standing there going, wait a minute, do I really need to get down there and eat that grass? So for a second, the giraffe starts doubting herself. And she tries to get her head down to eat the grass, but I don't know if you knew this, but giraffes have a heart that's 20 pounds in weight. So they have a really big heart. And it takes a lot of effort for blood to pump through that big of a heart. So when they lower their heads for too long, they start getting dizzy and they might faint. So the giraffe starts trying to eat the grass next to the turtle, but it starts getting faint and it starts getting dizzy. So it lifts its head up again and it realizes, no, 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 wait, I get to eat at the level of my vision.
Wow.
Right? So the giraffe is up here eating at the level of her vision. Now we can't blame the turtle. The turtle had good intentions because it is living and eating at the level of its vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. We need turtles and we need giraffes. The problem is when the giraffe tries to go down to the level of the turtle, or the turtle starts trying to climb a tree to get to the level of the giraffe, right? So what we get to recognize is where is our vision and how can we operate at the level of that vision without getting concerned about where the other person's vision is. And again, the turtle had great intentions. The turtle wasn't trying to harm the giraffe, but it was operating at a different level. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Let's just say light bulb moment just went off. Do you see it above my head right here?
So share a little bit of what that light bulb moment looks like.
Just that, I mean, the turtle had good intentions and was wanting to share what they knew, their knowledge, but it wasn't in the best interest of the giraffe. So you really have to think about, and I think it's the perspective that we have to think about. What's right for me isn't right for everyone else. And just because of that, I don't need to necessarily conform or change. I just need to, I think, check in with myself to see where I'm at and if that's the path I still want to continue on.
Absolutely. And the reason I love that story is because the turtle was trying to lead the giraffe, right? The turtle was trying to help the giraffe get to something that he considered was bigger and better, right? But the giraffe had to understand that her calling, her vision was
Mhm.
different and was at a completely different level, right? And it's not about looking down or looking up or believing you're better, believing you're worse. It's understanding that we have different visions and callings because it is in the differences that we complement each other. If we were all exactly the same, then a lot of things would go undone or everything would look exactly the same, one of the two, right? But it
Well,
is in our differences that we complement each other. And once you understand where your level of vision is, what you have been called to do, then you understand how to move forward. Like I can share, for example, my husband has a master's in divinity. He studied to be a pastor, right? And he had pastor credentials, but he has always known that his calling is not to be a head pastor of a church. His calling is in visiting people, it's in doing that kind of service. So he's a good assistant pastor, but he's not called to be a head pastor. That doesn't mean he doesn't have ambition. That doesn't mean he doesn't want to serve. On the contrary, that just means that he knows that's where his calling is. Someone else has the calling to be lead pastor, not him,
mhm.
right? So it's understanding where your vision is. My vision is to help people communicate in a way that lessens friction and contention and all that offense that's out there in the world, right? That's a big part of my calling. How do I start? By touching the lives of the people that are in my purview with the things that I have been gifted to be able to share. right? I
Mm-hmm.
told you before, and I will say it again. I think virtual assistants are dream facilitators, right? Because you allow entrepreneurs and business owners and people who have big dreams to let go of some of the things that might be occupying their time but are not in their zone of genius necessarily, so that they can focus on building their dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's different visions.
Exactly. And thank you for that.
It's the
I,
truth. You were going to say something else there, and I think I interrupted you.
no, I was just gonna say thank you for that. I mean, being a virtual assistant and being able to help others, um, for me, it's very fulfilling. And so, I don't know. I think to have people who recognize the importance of that, it feels good. So thank you.
You're welcome. So here's the thing. At this point in the conversation, the question going through most people's minds is probably, okay, I see that I should stop being a spectator of my own life. I never really wanted to be the spectator of my life, right?
Mhm.
How do I make the switch to then become the scriptor of my life again? How do I take the helm again and take control of the ship so that I can do the things that I know I've been called to do, that I know in my heart of hearts I'm meant to do, that are my passion, my zone of genius, the things that I'm meant to bring into this world. And that is where what I do comes in. Self leadership is that tool. It all starts inside. And I have a definition of self leadership that I always read because even though I know it, I never want to mess it up. So I'm going to read that definition for you guys again. Self leadership is leading yourself to the realization of your highest self and the best possible outcomes in coherence with your grand vision and calling through the effective and powerful management of those things which are under your responsibility and control. I'll read it again. It's leading yourself to the realization of your highest self and the best possible outcomes in coherence with your grand vision and calling through the effective and powerful management of those things which are under your responsibility and control. So, the first thing I love about self leadership is that it recognizes that you have a grand vision and calling, right? And that whatever you do in life that moves you in the direction of that grand vision and calling is going to go further, faster, and fulfill you in ways that nothing else can, right? And
Mhm.
I like to use the word coherence instead of alignment because to me, and it might just be my own perception, right? But to me, alignment sounds like you're waiting for serendipity. You're waiting for things to fall into place, and there's luck involved, and there's other outside forces at play, right? When I talk about coherence or integration, I'm talking about you do it. It's on you. You take
Mhm.
care of that, right? But once you know what your vision and your grand calling is, then you can start moving towards that highest self and the best possible outcomes that you can create. And the way you do that is through leveraging and taking complete powerful management and control of the things that are under your responsibility and control, right?
Mhm.
And here's where people fight me sometimes, and they're like, "But wait, there's very few things that are under my control. I gave up the notion of having control a long time ago. It's nonsense. You don't have control." Well, there's two things that you don't have control over. Two: circumstances and other people.
Mhm.
Those are the only two things that you cannot control. Circumstances and other people. Circumstances includes the weather, the loss of physics, right? Circumstances, the things that happen. And
Mhm.
other people you can't control. And honestly, once you understand that you can't control those two things, is liberating. Isn't it?
It really is. And that's something that I have discovered a lot during 2023. And it is once that light bulb goes off, it is very liberating.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing is, when you realize that you can't control circumstances or other people, then you switch to seeing the five things. And these are five big umbrellas, right? But the five things that I believe everybody has control and responsibility over. And once you understand that you can, in fact, not just control these things, but it is your responsibility to leverage them and maximize them and use them to the best of your ability, then the fact that you can't control circumstances or people becomes like secondary or tertiary. Even it doesn't become that relevant or important, because when you know that you can control these 5 things, then whatever circumstances are around you, you have the power to do different things with. Whatever people do, you decide what you do with, right? And it puts you at the driver's seat in so many ways. So here are the 5 things, and then we can talk about them each a little bit. You are in control of your emotions. That's the first one. You're in control of your decisions. That's the second one. You're in control of your words. That's really important. You're in control of your resources, and you're in control of your actions. So you're in control of your emotions, your decisions, your words, your resources, and your actions. And if you look at those 5 things, and we will talk about them briefly, each one of them, but if you look at those 5 things, whatever circumstances might be around you, might be going on, or whatever people might do or not do, or react or not react, you still have control over these 5 things that can flip those things instantaneously for you, that can give you a completely different way of managing it and a completely way of approaching it, so that you get different results, right? So emotions. We tend to think that emotions are this thing that just show up, right? And what we are taught to do with emotions is to suppress them if they don't feel good, right? And embrace them if they do. But the first thing is, emotions are neither good nor bad. They just are, right? They're just responses to stimulus, and they just are. They're not good or bad. And if you don't believe me, think about the last time you saw a big game in which the fans of the winning team went out and had just created a riot and destroyed everything around the premises of the stadium. The emotion they were experiencing was elation and happiness. They were happy because their team won, but they turned that happiness into destruction. So was it good, right? Or think about the stories, the many stories of parents who lose their child, and in that sadness and anger, they create foundations and institutions and organizations and movements to help other people not go through the same thing that they went through. So their emotion was sadness and anger, but they created something amazing. Is it good or is it bad? Right? So emotions only have the meaning we attach to them. And they're only helpful or unhelpful depending on how we define them and how we decide to use them, right? So we're completely in control of how we see our emotions and how we define those emotions, right? Making decisions. You can have a circumstance that is difficult, but you decide how you're going to handle that circumstance, right? In the same manner, you can have a circumstance that could be, for most people, a lucky circumstance. And if you handle it poorly, then what happens? I am thinking right now of Will Smith, how he always talks about how his first couple of millions that he made, he just squandered, didn't do well with them, and was actually on the verge of being arrested because he didn't even pay taxes on them. Right? And so he had a lucky circumstance, but turned out not to be so wonderful because of the decisions that he made. Right. On the other hand, I'm thinking about my dad was diagnosed with a terminal illness when I was 13. I'm the third of 5 kids. We each faced that information, right? That news differently. But the decisions I made led me to learn so much about leadership, about communication, about bringing people together, about managing my emotions, about doing so many other things that I now use to help other people. So it was a positive thing based on the decisions that I made, right? And they weren't all good decisions, but the combination of them led to good things. So your decisions can shift the entire outcome of circumstances. Make sense?
It does, yes.
The next thing is words. I'm a big believer in the power of words, starting from the way you talk to yourself, to the way you talk to the people closest to you, to the way you talk to masses through social media or through public presentations or whatever it is that you do. And depending on the words that you choose, you can create different outcomes. I have learned to be really, really diligent in noticing the way I talk to myself and on shifting the communication with myself that doesn't promote positive outcomes. And if we're not aware of those things, if we don't know how to use our words in the most productive way, then we're squandering a great resource, right? And self-leadership, part of it is learning how to communicate to yourself and others in the most effective way.
Exactly. Yeah.
When I talk about resources, I have 4 things that I consider your main resources, and it's 4 T's: time, talents, treasures, and teams. The way you use your time, the way you use your skills, your abilities, your knowledge, your talents, right? Your treasures is anything material. It includes money, but it's not just money, anything material. If you have a car, your house, your anything that's material, the way that you use it, right? And teams is the people around you. If you know you're in control of those 4 resources and how you use them and how you leverage it, just think about those 4 things, just teams. If you use your teams effectively, how much further can you get? Right? And then finally, your actions, what you do or don't do, how you move or don't move, when you move or don't move. That is all under your control. And it can make a huge difference because I get a lot of cramps, leg cramps, right? And I've learned that if I get a leg cramp and I just try to sit there, it's going to get worse. But if I stand and stretch, it gets better, right? So, depending on what you're facing and what the situation is, sometimes the best thing to do is just move out of the situation or take just some sort of step. Sometimes the best move is to stay and just watch. So, depending on the situation, what actions you take can propel you forward or they can keep you stuck. So again, if you know that you are in full responsibility and control of your emotions, your decisions, your words, your resources, and your actions, it stands to reason then that you can just script your entire life one responsibility and control moment at a time. What are your thoughts?
Makes perfect sense. And it does. It makes perfect sense. But why is it so hard to follow it? When you hear it in workshops and in talks like these, it really does makes perfect sense. But boy, isn't it hard to implement and to act on it?
Yeah. The thing is, we have. Sorry, go ahead.
What suggestions do you have for those of us watching to start taking those steps forward?
So, the first thing I was going to suggest, since we're having this conversation near the end of the year, is people get so caught up in making New Year's resolutions. I learned a long time ago that it's a lot more effective to make a determination of who you want to be over the next 6 to 12 months, right? So instead of saying, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to hit the gym, I'm going to make this much money, okay, who do I get to be that actually makes sense to be in possession of those things, right? Or to be in a place to do those things. Because if who I want to be is an active, energetic person, then it makes sense that in the process of becoming that active, energetic person, I might lose weight because I'm going to move more, because I'm going to take better care of my body, and I'm going to make sure that I do everything in my power to have that energy, right? So we are more propelled by identity. And I say this all the time. We don't do what we want. We don't even do what we believe. We do who we are. And the only way to snap out of things that we don't particularly like is to start working towards becoming the future you that doesn't do those things, that doesn't put up with those things, or that is elevated to a level where the next step is what makes sense, right? So you start by, instead of, I mean, set the goals if you want. I'm not against goals. I think goals are important, right? But as you set the goals, think very carefully about who do you get to become in order to be the person that would generate those results, that would get to that space. And then the next question is, what would that person do, or how would that person act, right? What would they look like? What would they think like? What kind of actions would they take?
Mm-hmm.
And start impersonating the future you, right? So start doing the things that you know the future you who is that thing that you want to become would do, right? The
Mm-hmm.
other thing is understanding that you are, in fact, the scriptor of your life. You get to give meaning to the things that you experience and the way that you experience them. But we all have very deeply rooted programming that is embedded in the way we operate and in the way we do things. And the best analogy I've ever heard for the programming in our brain is, I don't know if you've ever been to a farm and seen a tractor in action, like a real tractor, but tractors are extremely heavy and
Mm-hmm.
they tend to haul things in pretty much the same route, right? Like they keep going the same path to get the stuff and to bring the stuff back and to get the stuff. So over time, especially if there's been rain or whatever, you start
Mm-hmm.
seeing the grooves that the tractor creates on the farm. And there comes a time after a while where the person driving the tractor can let go of the wheel and the tractor is still going to get to where it needs to get, because the grooves that it's created are so deeply rooted that it's just going to follow those grooves almost as if it were train tracks, train tracks, right? Almost like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the way our programming is in our brain. It's like those grooves that the tractor makes, especially after a heavy rain, and it just gets deeply rooted and you can let go of the wheel and it moves. And that's why it can get so hard to get out of that, because it becomes automatic. You don't even have to think about it. You don't have to use any energy. You don't have to stop and think about it. You don't have to worry about it. It's going to happen, right? But when you realize that it's taking you down a path that you don't like, and you start trying to shift that tractor at first, oh my gosh, is there going to be resistance, right? At first, getting that wheel to move so that you can navigate out of those grooves, it's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of energy. And if you let go of the wheel for even a second, the tractor is going to go back to the path that's already been laid. And you have to again exert that energy and push and move and do the things, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's why it is so hard, because we have these deep grooves of programming that we're fighting against, and there's all this resistance. But it's through consistent, deliberate, and determined action in the other direction that you get there. And that, for most of us, requires accountability. For most of us, it requires help. For most of us, it requires coaching and assistance, right? That's why people like me exist, so that we can help you navigate through the process. But
Mm-hmm.
it does require getting rid of that old programming and moving in the opposite direction.
And all of that takes time and is a process.
Absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
it takes having a little bit of grace with yourself, right? Because we tend to get so frustrated and we're like, okay, I understand this. I know what I should do. And I try and then I go back. And that happens to all of us because of what I said. It's so deeply rooted, it's so ingrained that trying to get out of it takes a
Mm-hmm.
lot of effort. But once you finally create that new groove, once you're finally there, then it becomes easier and it becomes less of a strain and less of an effort. And that's what you want to work towards. That's why I recommend, as we're moving into the new year, instead of thinking, okay, what are my top 3 goals, New Year's resolutions that I want to create? Think more in terms of, who do I get to become? And it doesn't have to take 12 months. You can do this in 3 to 6. Who do I want to become? That
Mm-hmm.
is going to be the kind of person that can create the kind of results that I'm looking for. And what would that person do? How would that person act? What decisions would they make? And try to follow that as best you can as you become that new person that you know you're looking to become.
Okay. So, like, as you said, that it doesn't really have to take 12 months, because here we are at the end of the year. Everyone's preparing for the new year and looking at it for 365 days. So, would you recommend just taking one process at a time, one element that we're wanting to work on, and doing it for a shorter period of time so that we have that success?
Absolutely. See, one thing that I learned a while back is that one of the things that makes this whole process of goals and achievement and all this so daunting for most of us is we look at 365 days, right? We look at a year and we think,
Mhm.
okay, from now to the end of the year, what do I want to do? So we see such a long runway, so to speak, that
Mhm.
we fill it with things. We're like, okay, wait, I have 12 months. I have to have at least 10 to 15 things, right? Or at least 5 to 6 things. And we overload ourselves with all of these goals. And at the same time, we see the runway so large that we think, oh, I have time. If I don't start right now, I can start tomorrow. If I don't start tomorrow, I can start next week. And we keep pushing it off because the runway is really long, right? There's this law called Parkinson's law that says that tasks will expand to the time allotted to them. So if you give yourself a year to do something, it's going to take you a year or longer, right?
Mhm.
So what I've learned to do is instead of thinking of the whole year, I think of the quarter. Let's think of just the
Yes.
first quarter, three
Mhm.
months. And I'm going to set 1, 2, at the most 3 things that I'm working towards. I don't even call them goals. 3 destinations, 3 achievements, 3 movements forward, whatever word resonates with you. I don't call them goals. I call them destinations, right?
Mhm.
And then I think about, okay, what kind of person do I need to be to make sure that these things happen in 3 months, right? And then I start asking myself as that future, and I know that sounds neurotic, but bear with me for a minute. I start
Mhm.
thinking, okay, future me, future Marcy, that is this and this and this. What would she do? What would you do, future Marcy, to go through these processes and get through these to these destinations? And I start taking note of what the answer is to that question. And that's when then I start setting smaller chunks of things that I want to do on a daily and weekly basis. But I never set any destination that is longer than 3 months. Yes, I do have a longer vision in mind. That's my
Mhm.
ultimate calling. That's what I ultimately want to get to. But that only serves as the filter for what I am working towards right now. If it's moving me in the direction of that, then it's good. If it's not moving me in the direction of that, then I need to rethink it.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that smaller goal of the 3 months, it sets us up for success instead of failure because
Absolutely.
that's achievable and it's not that, like you said, that long runway.
Absolutely. Well,
Marcy,
I just go ahead.
it's been amazing. I know
Oh,
we need to wrap up, but I just want to say thank you so much for once again bringing us such powerful plans for the future that we can start to make ourselves better, better individuals, be there better for our clients. And I'm really excited about the confidence mini workshop that you said you have coming up. So for all of our viewers who might be catching this on the replay, definitely check out Marcy and have the opportunity to attend that mini workshop. You won't be disappointed.
oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's going to be a mini course that's going to be self-paced, so be on the lookout for that. And if you want to get on the wait list, just send me a DM, and I will make sure that you get the info as soon as it's out. So, anyway, thank you, Tori, and thank you for chatting with me and having fun with me today. I mean, I had a lot of fun. I always have fun on these things.
Too, and it was always a pleasure. Well, for everyone that's watching, thank you so much for being here with us today, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year.
Sounds
Thanks,
great.
Marcy.
Thank you, guys.